organisms need nutrients to live. Animals get those by ingesting other organisms. We then have large molecules that we take in, that's the food, and they are broken down by mechanical digestion, that's the chewing, and also the churning in the stomach, that's when the stomach talks to you, you can hear that. And also, we have chemical digestion, and that's done by enzymes that are secreted by the body. The small molecules then needed for animal function are absorbed into the bloodstream and brought to the cells for processing. Waste that we make accumulate is then excreted at the end. So let's now talk about more in detail the different steps. Food is taken into the oral cavity and ground up mechanically by chewing, and we call that mastication. Salivary glands secrete saliva, which lubricate the food and help make it into a semi liquid bolus that can be swallowed. Saliva also contains buffers for acidic food and also antibacterial lysosomes. Chemical digestion of starches and fats starts also in the mouth by enzymes secreted by the salivary glands, and those are amylase for the starches and lipase for the fats. The tongue helps push the bolus posterior towards the pharynx, which connects the nasal and oral cavities to the trachea and the esophagus. Swallowing, which we call deglutition, starts with the bolus pressing against the soft palate, and that's a voluntary part, a voluntary phase. And then this triggers the swallowing reflex, and that moves the bolus into the esophagus, which is essentially a muscular tube. And we can see that right in here, where see here, you can see the salivary glands that we talked in the previous slide. And then this tube, that's the esophagus right in here. Involuntary waves of alternate muscle contraction of the circular and longitudinal muscle layers moves food towards the stomach. And you can see that visualized here where we have a outside longitudinal muscle and an internal layer, that's the cross-sectional muscle. And then when they contract alternatively, then that moves the bolus in one direction. And we do that unidirectionally. The only exception for that is vomiting, and that goes in the reverse direction, of course, when we want to get rid of stuff. So then the end of the esophagus is guarded by a ring-like muscle sphincter. And we call that one, and you could see that sort of here, right here, where the esophagus and the stomachs come together. It's not labeled here, but that's the gastroesophageal sphincter. So if esophagus and gastro stands for stomach. And we also call that the cardiac sphincter. And then this sphincter forms a valve that prevents stomach content to move into the esophagus, because the stomach content is very acidic. And so if it does move up, it gives us this acid reflux, or what we call heartburn. It also then, of course, the sphincter needs to open and let the food in, and it does that, and this reflexively opens when the food presses on it. The stomach is a bag-like muscular organ that further physically and chemically digests food. It has 3 layers of muscle that sort of massages the bolus in rhythmic contractions, and that's that churning. When we then look at the stomach lining, some cells, the chief cells, secrete pepsinogens, and you see that here in the lining. Oops. These are the ones that are deepest in these. The stomach lining comes with these folds and these deep crypts. And so in these crypts, there are these cells, and the deepest ones are the chief cells. And the chief cells is what secretes pepsinogen. And pepsinogen is an inactive enzyme that breaks down protein when activated by a strong acid into pepsin. And the strong acid is secreted by another stomach cell called a parietal cell. And you see that when you look back into these gastric pits here, it's actually the pits. You see the parietal cell here secretes the hydrochloric acid, and then that activates the pepsinogen and makes it into the active form of pepsin, which then can digest the protein. And only having pepsin active when food is present is important because we don't, so that it doesn't digest the stomach lining itself. And we also have a thick mucus that helps with that. That's the mucus cells, or we can also call them the mucus neck cells, right here. And they then help create a lining that the stomach wall itself is protected. Another thing that I want to mention here is the term gen. Whenever you see the word pepsin, and here you have this word pepsin, and then all you do is at the end you say ogen, and the ogen means, or the genesis comes from Genesis, and that means it's the inactive form, and it will need to be activated. So when you see that ending in an enzyme, you know it's an inactive form of an enzyme. The partially digested food, now called chyme, moves in small amounts through the pyloric sphincter into the small intestine. It starts with the duodenum, which is called the 12-finger gut, and that embraces the pancreas, which empties pancreatic juices into it. And the pancreatic juices have neutralizing alkaline and also lots of digestive enzymes in it. Digestion of protein and fats and carbohydrates is completed in this part of the small intestine, this first part, and then small monomer particles are absorbed into the bloodstream for distribution throughout the body um, as we move further down towards this into the small intestine. The first part here is the duodenum, and this is this portion here, and then you see here the word jejunum. That's the second portion of the small intestine. The small intestine is a long muscular tube, and it's highly folded with many finger-like projections. And you can see some of that right here, and we call these finger-like projections villi. And they're covered by tiny hairs, and the tiny hairs we call microvilli. And then together, the microvilli hold a lot of the enzymes. They call them the brush border enzymes that then digest the food into these small monomers that we can absorb. And having such a huge surface area helps the efficiency of the absorption, and the up and down the villi and the microvilli enhance the surface area dramatically. Bile salts prevent fat from clumping together, making it accessible for digestion by enzymes. And we call that emulsification. And you can visualize that when you have a salad dressing and you see the vinegar on one side and the oil on the other side. So the oil likes to clump together in a watery environment, and that makes it inaccessible for enzymes to work on it. And you can sort of see here what a bile salt can do, because it's the emulsification process that exposes makes the fat big glob, big droplet, small enough that it's a droplet enough that then enzymes can work on it. And the bile salt, the cool thing about them is they have both a side that's fatty loving, hydrophobic, uh, water fearing or fat loving, and then a side that's water loving or hydrophilic. And so having that two sides helps us be able to have the hydrophobic side go towards the fat droplets and make it small enough that, again, the enzymes can work on it. Monosaccharides, amino acids, fatty acids, vitamins, and other nutrients are then absorbed by enterocytes in the intestinal lining of mostly the jejunum. And after the jejunum, the ileum is next, and gradually we have less and less folds and less food, and more water is being absorbed. And you can see that sort of here. You got the part after the duodenum has lots of folds in here, and then you see how the folds slowly decrease, and that's then the latter part of the small intestine, the ileum. Undigested food empties into the cecum through the ileocecal valve. And the cecum is sort of the first portion of the colon, the large intestine. So you see here the ileocecal valve right here, this thing right in here. And so the ileum comes in here, and then the cecum is this pouch here that then the colon moves upward in this direction. All right. The vermiform appendix, and that means worm like, and you see that's a little worm looking thing, is attached to the cecum. And it has at this point a minor role in immunity. But the danger with it is if it gets infected and potentially burst, and that can be a problem. That can really be dangerous because what happens, we essentially have external content because the digestive system is open to the mouth and the anus, so that's external. We have that external content explode and get dispersed into the internal environment, and we need to have that be protected. We can't have bacteria in there in that part. So that's why that's dangerous. The large intestine is surrounded. It surrounds the small intestine. It has ascending, a transverse, and a descending colon. And you can see that here as the ascending goes up, the transverse around, and then the descending follows down. And the sigmoid colon follows it into the rectum, which then empties through the anal canal. And a sigmoid is the starts with an S, so it's this round structure, this S sort of shaped. And then we have the rectum and we have the anal canal at the end. The colon absorbs mostly water and salts, but we also have good bacteria. We call them the commensals in there, and they create the intestinal flora. And those bacteria help further digest the food and decompose indigestible food items. But also it helps absorb some gases and things that we don't necessarily all understand that are very vital for our system to function. So they have an important role. Accessory organs add secretions and enzymes that break down food into nutrients. So we have the salivary glands do that, the liver, pancreas, and the gallbladder. Hormones are, in response to food intake, are the things that control those secretions. And that makes sense. You just visualize, close your eyes and visualize a nice full fleshy lemon, and you bite into it in your mind, in your visual, and your salivary glands will start doing some work in there and at least get prepared for that. The liver is the largest internal organ. It secretes bile, enabling fat absorption. It also metabolizes macromolecules, the carbohydrates, the proteins, and the fats, synthesizes many plasma proteins, and detoxifies the blood. Like it takes medications out, and it also, for example, processes alcohol or also the fructose in sugar, for example. The gallbladder stores and concentrates bile. And you see that's that green hanging structure there. And it really is that green in the body. It's not just painted like that. This is one that really looks like that. The pancreas, then, that's the other, the yellowish looking thing here. See, this is the pancreas. And here's to the bottom. You can see how it embraces that pancreatic head there. And the pancreas secretes bicarbonate solution that neutralizes the acidic chyme that comes from the stomach. And then also the pancreatic juices contain many enzymes digesting carbohydrates, proteins, and fats into the absorbable monomers. The other thing the pancreas does, it secretes the insulin and the glucagon, and that we know that from the blood sugar control. So the pancreas has multiple functions. That brings me a little bit to nutrition. A diet needs to provide calories for energy and also vitamins and minerals necessary for maintaining long term body structure, proper body and reproductive function, and overall health as well. Carbohydrates are broken down into glucose for energy. Humans do not digest the cellulose, but what it does in the body, it stimulates the internal activity in us and shortens the passage time of food. So when we talk about the carbohydrates, talking about the cellulose, which is the fiber in our food, is very helpful for that, but also it diminishes blood sugar peaks, and that helps prevent diabetes, and that's also very good. Protein is another macromolecule that we eat, that we need to bring into the body. And protein provides amino acids, which then give the body the building blocks to make its own protein. So we can't eat protein from animals and then we just use the proteins like the albumin or so that we eat. We break it down to the building blocks and then we use those building blocks, those amino acids, to make the new proteins in our body. And then fats in our diet, in our nutrition, very important. They add flavor to food and also promote a sense of fullness. That's known as satiety. Lipids are an essential component of many body structures, so they're very important. They're included in all the cell membranes, in the brain and spinal cord. Also, fat-soluble hormones contain them, and they also are necessary to help absorb fat-soluble vitamins. And what I posted up here goes together with the protein because I always like to understand the the protein in vegetables. I'm not a big meat eater, not because I have anything against eating meat. It's just I'm more like in vegetables. And so I like that little chart up there because you can see, look at that. Kale has 45% protein. So that's pretty good. So if you need some protein, there is some veggies for you as well as the meat, of course. We can synthesize many of the molecules from the precursors that we eat, but some, though, must be obtained from food. And those we call essential nutrients. They include omega 3s and 6 fatty acids, which are used in membrane phospholipids. They also include the vitamins, and the vitamins assist enzymes, and we call them therefore also coenzymes. And we also need to ingest minerals, and they help with many functions, including muscle nerve function, also enzyme function. They call them the cofactors. And also 8 of the 20 amino acids we can't make, and we call them essentials as well. So we also need to ingest those. All right, so that gives us a little bit of an overview of the digestive system and a little bit of nutrition. I hope you learned something, and let's move on now to the respiratory system and the cardiovascular system.